The silence has shattered. And the truth is, a firestorm. Are you ready to face what's coming? Or will you cling to a comforting illusion? From what corner of the world are you watching this video? Drop your country in the comments below, because the tremors shaking the Catholic Church are reverberating across continents, from the pews of Rome to the parishes of Peru, from the heart of Europe to the farthest reaches of the globe. Your voice, your perspective, matters in this pivotal moment of spiritual reckoning. Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò, a name that ignites both fierce devotion and fiery controversy, has broken his loaded silence not with the quiet of retreat or the diplomacy of compromise, but with a blazing, unapologetic rejection of Pope Leo XIV's nascent papacy. This isn't a mere critique. It's a spiritual earthquake, a thunderclap that demands the faithful confront an unsettling reality. Viganò's latest message isn't aimed solely at the new pope. It's a searing indictment of what he calls a virtual church, a collective illusion woven by Catholics desperate for hope, yet blind to the continuity of a crisis dressed in the finer vestments of a new pontificate. His words, raw and unrelenting, force us to ask, is this papacy the dawn of restoration, or a polished extension of a church adrift? When Pope Leo XIV stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Square, the white smoke still fresh in memory, he spoke with a gentleness that felt like a balm to a church, bruised by years of scandal, division, and ambiguity. His opening words were soft, invoking unity, peace, and a renewed missionary zeal. His tone was pastoral, his gestures humble, his vision one of a church as a family, not a fortress. To many, it was a breath of fresh air, a pope who seemed to embody dignity without aggression, reverence without rigidity. Yet, beneath this serene surface, cracks are already forming, and Viganò's voice cuts through the calm like a blade, warning that this is not change, but continuity, not reform, but refinement of a trajectory many hoped had ended. Viganò's silence until now was not the quiet of disengagement. It was the kind of silence that hums with tension, the kind you only recognize as loaded in hindsight. As a former Vatican diplomat and apostolic nuncio to the United States, Viganò once moved within the highest echelons of the Church's inner workings, entrusted with discretion and loyalty. But in 2018, he burned those bridges with a bombshell letter accusing Vatican officials of covering up abuse and calling for Pope Francis's resignation. That moment redefined him not as a rebel seeking chaos, but as a voice willing to name what others dared not. Now, with Pope Leo XIV, he returns with the same unyielding clarity, and his message is not just a critique of a pope, but a challenge to the faithful. Stop building a church that exists only in your hopes. Pope Leo's early days have been marked by deliberate ambiguity, a trait Viganò finds not prudent but perilous. Leo's reaffirmation of synodality, his repeated invocations of Vatican II, his appointment of women to high curial roles, such as Sister Tiziana Maletti, notably without a traditional habit, and his framing of evangelization in terms of harmony rather than conversion are, to Viganò, not missteps, but evidence. Evidence of a papacy continuing the path of Francis, cloaked in softer rhetoric and traditional aesthetics. To Viganò, these are not isolated choices, but part of a broader pattern, a church that prioritizes dialogue over doctrine, inclusion over truth, and optics over authority. He warns that Catholics are projecting their dreams of restoration onto a pope who offers no such promise, crafting a virtual papacy built on selective gestures, a Latin phrase here, a reverent nod there, a stole that evokes tradition but masks a deeper alignment with modernist reforms. The symbolism of Sister Tiziana's appointment, for instance, is not trivial, it's existential. For centuries, a nun's habit was more than fabric. It was a visible vow, a rejection of the world's values, a sign of consecration that spoke before words were needed. When a high-ranking Vatican official appears without it, the absence resonates like a missing note in a sacred hymn. It's not about her qualifications by all accounts. She is capable, but about what this choice signals to a church already struggling to distinguish itself from a secularizing world. Viganò doesn't comment directly on her attire, but he doesn't need to. His broader warning encompasses it. These appointments, these optics, these echoes of Francis's style are, in his view, part of a deliberate continuity with what he calls heretical structures, a reshaping of the Church under the guise of inclusivity, all while retaining just enough Catholic language to keep the faithful pacified. This is where the emotional weight of Viganò's message lands hardest. He's not just critiquing Rome, he's accusing the faithful of complicity in their own deception. Catholics, he argues, are exhausted, tired of scandals, tired of division, tired of choosing sides. In their fatigue, they've latched onto Pope Leo's calm demeanor, his traditional vestments, his Augustinian references, and built a narrative of hope around him. But Viganò calls this a delusion, a virtual church where beauty substitutes for truth, where a pope's gentle tone is mistaken for orthodoxy. He points to Leo's speeches, which speak of mission but rarely of conversion, of peace but seldom of sin, of dialogue but not of the Church's unique salvific role. To Viganò, this is not pastoral wisdom, it's a calculated ambiguity that risks hollowing out the Church's mission. The faithful are divided, and the fault lines are deepening. Some, weary of conflict, embrace Leo's tone as a return to stability, a shepherd who seeks to unite rather than divide. They see his restraint as a sign of healing, his diplomacy as a way to calm a church battered by public infighting. Others, however, hear in his words a troubling echo of Francis's papacy, synodality, interfaith dialogue, and a mission framed in sociopolitical terms rather than spiritual urgency. They wanted a pope who would restore clarity, who would reaffirm doctrine with unapologetic boldness. Instead, they see a continuation, softer in delivery but unchanged in direction. Online, the tension is palpable in Twitter threads dissecting Leo's ambiguous phrases, in YouTube comments oscillating between trust and betrayal, in Discord servers where Catholics debate whether to hope or resist. Even influencers are split, some preaching patience, others warning of compromise. Viganò's voice resonates because it taps into this unease, naming what many feel but fear to say. The Church is not at rest, it's at a crossroads. His critics call him divisive, a dissident stoking fear. His supporters see him as a prophet, unafraid to confront a hierarchy they believe has lost its way. But whether you view him as pariah or truth-teller, his words carry undeniable weight, because they come from a man who has sacrificed everything, position, reputation, comfort, to speak them. He's not asking for dialogue, he's demanding a reckoning. He accuses the faithful of crafting a church from wishful thinking, where reverence is mistaken for reform, where a pope's kindness is taken as a promise of fidelity. To Viganò, this is not hope, it's spiritual escapism, and it's leading the Church not toward salvation, but toward irrelevance. The broader picture is one of a church pulling in two directions. On one side, those who champion Leo's vision, a church that listens, that accompanies, that widens its tent to include the marginalized, see progress. They argue the Church must evolve, must speak to a world that no longer responds to rigid doctrine. Bishops and cardinals applaud Leo's appointments, his synodality, his refusal to reignite old battles. To them, he is a promise fulfilled, a pope who can heal without condemning, who can build bridges without burning them. But on the other side, traditionalists and even centrists feel a chill. They see excommunications, suspensions, and reassignments without explanation, silences that speak louder than words. They hear homilies that soothe but don't challenge, that call for journey but don't define the destination. To them, unity feels like compliance, and the Church's voice, once a trumpet blast, is becoming a whisper. This tension isn't just theological, it's existential. Lay Catholics, once passive recipients of magisterial wisdom, are now organizing on Substack, TikTok, newsletters, and Reddit. They share Latin prayers, critique synodality, and call for spiritual warfare. Some are raw, some fringe, but many are thoughtful, driven not by politics, but by a desperate need for clarity. They don't want a church that blends into the world. They want a church that stands apart, unmistakable in its mission to save souls. Yet, Leo's speeches, like his address to the Pontifical Mission Societies, speak of fraternity, not repentance, of harmony, not conversion. To his defenders, this is Vatican II's spirit, reaching a bruised world with compassion. To his critics, it's a betrayal of the Great Commission, a mission stripped of its eternal stakes. Viganò's warning is not just about one pope or one policy, it's about the soul of the Church. He sees a papacy offering comfort without correction, hope without anchorage. He names names: Francis, Cardinal Parolin, the Vatican Bank, and calls the system not misguided, but corrupted. To him, Leo is not evil, but complicit, carrying the banner of continuity under a gentler guise. His words are severe, almost apocalyptic, because he believes time is running out. The faithful, he argues, are not just passive victims, but active participants in their own deception, building a church from fragments of nostalgia and selective hope. The danger, he warns, is that this virtual church feels safe, looks holy, but lacks the fire of truth. So, here we stand, at the edge of a question that demands an answer. What is the Church becoming? Is Pope Leo a bridge to healing, a shepherd holding the line, or a figurehead for a quiet drift toward a church that speaks to everyone but stands for nothing? Viganò offers no compromise, no olive branch, only a mirror. In it, we see not just a pope, but ourselves. Are we seeing the Church as it is, or as we need it to be? Are we clinging to gestures, vestments, Latin, reverence, while ignoring the substance beneath? The faithful are not just watching events unfold, they're watching narratives form, competing visions of what the Church should be. One side sees progress in widening the tent. The other sees peril in blurring the lines. This is the fire Viganò is fanning, not rebellion, but reckoning. He's not asking for division, he's pleading for clarity. Because when a pope speaks of peace, but not of sin, of mission, but not of salvation, of dialogue, but not of truth, the faithful are left to fill the silence themselves. And in that silence, suspicion grows, despair festers, and the Church risks becoming not a beacon, but a shadow, a beautiful, familiar shadow, but a shadow nonetheless. So, what future are we being led into? Will you recognize it when it arrives? Are we embracing the reality of where the Church is heading? Or are we inventing a fiction to dull the pain? This isn't about aesthetics or politics, it's about the soul of the Church, its voice, its mission. Share your thoughts, your country, your stake in this moment in the comments below. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because the next statement from Rome might not just be controversial, it might be the one that decides whether the Church stands or splinters. The choice is ours, but the time to choose is now.